Have you ever thought about the unsung heroes of the wizarding world? What if one of them had discovered Voldemort's greatest secret long before Harry Potter? In today's video, you will find out the incredible, yet forgotten story of Regulus Black, the Slytherin who dared to defy the Dark Lord. Regulus Black, a name rarely mentioned. He wasn't the chosen one, never fought in battles and never received honors. Yet he was the first to uncover Voldemort's secret and risk everything to bring him down. Why has his story faded into obscurity? Why did the Harry Potter films erase his sacrifice? And why is Regulus Black the true, unsung hero of Slytherin? Let's dive into it. Who was RAB? The books dedicate an entire chapter to his story. It was Kreacher, the Black family's house elf, who revealed the truth. Voldemort once took Kreacher to a hidden cave and forced him to drink a deadly potion guarding a locket, one of his Horcruxes. Abandoned and left to die, Kreacher miraculously escaped and returned to Regulus with the horrifying truth. What Regulus did next changed everything. He went back to that cave, knowing he would not return. He drank the cursed potion himself, weakened beyond defense, and ordered Kreacher to take the locket and destroy it. But the elf failed. The Horcrux remained intact, and Regulus vanished, his act of defiance buried in secrecy. Unlike his rebellious older brother Sirius, Regulus once embraced the Black family's pure blood ideology, even joining the Death Eaters. But deep down, he was different. He was the only Black family member to show kindness to Kreacher. Something in Voldemort's cruelty made him turn against him. He knew his sacrifice was just a small step, yet he took it anyway. The saddest part? No one knew. Sirius and the rest of the Black family believed he was executed for treason, never realizing his true heroism. Even Harry was led to believe that Regulus was nothing more than a cowardly follower who got in over his head. But that was far from the truth. Regulus wasn't just another Death Eater who had regrets. He was the first to strike at Voldemort's Achilles' heel. And yet the films nearly erased his legacy. Regulus Black in the movies. His entire story was reduced to a single 3-minute scene. The films merely acknowledged that he was a Death Eater who died young. Kreacher briefly mentioned that Regulus once had the real locket, which was later stolen by Mundungus Fletcher. And that was it. The film moved on. Regulus's story wasn't essential to the plot, but it was one of the most intriguing untold tales of the series. How did he find out about the Horcrux? Why did he decide to destroy it? The movies left these questions unanswered. And yet, they are the very things that define him as one of the most remarkable figures in Slytherin history. The true unsung hero of Slytherin. Looking beyond the books, we can speculate about his reasons for betrayal. Disgust at Voldemort's ruthlessness, realization that the Dark Lord had no loyalty to his followers, a sudden moment of conscience. The truth remains a mystery, but one thing is certain. Regulus had the courage to reject everything he was taught, even at the cost of his own life. Now let's compare him to the ultimate Slytherin hero, Severus Snape. Snape's redemption arc is legendary. Fans have debated for years whether his sacrifices were noble or selfish. He spent decades as a double agent, risking everything, yet his motivations were deeply personal. His love for Lily Potter was the driving force behind everything he did. Snape ensured that his story of unrequited love was known. Regulus, however, died in silence, his heroism buried for 2 decades. He never sought recognition, never expected redemption. He simply did what was right. In the end, who was the greater hero? The one whose name was cleared, or the one who was forgotten? What if Regulus Black had survived? What if, by some miracle, he had managed to escape the cave? his body broken, his mind fogged by pain, but still alive. Would he have returned to London? Would he have tried to warn someone? Or would he have lived in the shadows like Snape, playing a dangerous game of deception? Regulus knew too much. He had uncovered Voldemort's darkest secret, the key to his immortality. If he had lived, he could have been one of the most valuable allies the Order of the Phoenix had ever known. Unlike the rest of the wizarding world, he understood exactly how the Dark Lord had defied death. He had seen the Horcrux with his own eyes, felt its sinister pull. Dumbledore spent years unraveling this mystery. Regulus had figured it out on his own. But knowledge alone wouldn't have saved him. He had already betrayed the Death Eaters. There would have been no way back. Voldemort would have hunted him down, just as he hunted anyone who dared to defy him. Regulus would have had two choices, go into hiding or fight. Could he have sought out the Order? Would they have believed him? Sirius never spoke kindly of his brother. My idiot brother, soft enough to believe the Dark Lord actually cared about blood purity, he scoffed in the Order of the Phoenix. Would he have trusted him if he had come knocking on Grimmauld Place? Sirius spent years thinking of Regulus as nothing more than another blind follower, a boy too weak to stand against the family's expectations. But if Regulus had returned, if he had told him the truth, that he had turned on Voldemort, that he had sacrificed everything to bring him down, would it have changed anything? Imagine that moment. Two brothers, separated by ideology, brought back together by war, a lifetime of resentment and misunderstanding crashing down in a single conversation. Would Sirius have seen the hero standing before him, or just the shadow of their family's past? And what of Kreacher? The old elf had mourned Regulus for decades, carrying his memory like a sacred burden. If his master had returned, weakened but breathing, Kreacher would have hidden him, sheltered him. But Regulus wasn't the kind to sit idly by. He would have acted. Would he have sought out Dumbledore, trusted the man who once fought against everything his family stood for? Or would he have tried to destroy the Horcrux himself, knowing it might cost him his life a second time? Regulus never craved recognition. He never fought for glory. Unlike Snape, who carefully crafted his double life, ensuring that his sacrifices would be known in the end, Regulus made no plans for his legacy. He acted because he believed it was the right thing to do. Would he have risked stepping out of the shadows to finish what he started? Or would he have remained a ghost, an unseen force working in secret? The war would have changed. The moment Voldemort returned, Regulus's knowledge would have been a weapon. Harry only learned of the Horcruxes through Dumbledore, piecing together clues from a long-dead past. But what if there had been someone who already knew? Someone who could have led them straight to the truth? Regulus could have told them about the cave, about the cursed potion, about the locket. Maybe the search for the other Horcruxes would have begun sooner. Maybe the war would have ended differently. But the real question remains, if he had survived, could he have faced his brother? For years, Sirius lived with the belief that Regulus had been just another casualty of Voldemort's reign, a foolish boy who got in too deep. He never knew the truth. He never got to see the brother who had defied the Dark Lord, who had chosen sacrifice over submission. If they had met again, would it have been a reunion or another battle? Would old wounds have kept them apart, or would they have finally stood together, two black brothers against the darkness? We will never know. Regulus Black's story was cut short before it could be told in full. His name was whispered in passing, his actions buried beneath the chaos of war. But his sacrifice mattered. His choice changed everything, even if history never gave him the recognition he deserved. Regulus was not just the younger brother of Sirius Black. He was not just a Death Eater who had a change of heart. He was a hero. a forgotten one, a name lost in the shadows. But for those who remember, he will always be the Slytherin who stood alone against Voldemort. Regulus Black and Draco Malfoy. Two Slytherins, two different paths, both born into pure-blood families, raised in the shadows of the Dark Lord, taught to worship his power. But when the truth about Voldemort came crashing down, their choices shaped their fates in ways they never could have foreseen. Regulus had no one, no guiding hand, no escape route. He made his decision in silence, carrying the weight of it alone. Draco, on the other hand, had people watching over him, whether he realized it or not. Dumbledore, always a step ahead, saw the doubt in his eyes. Narcissa, blinded by love for her son, defied Voldemort when it mattered most. Even Harry, his lifelong rival, extended mercy when Draco least expected it. Circumstances saved him. Regulus had no such luck. Draco hesitated. He stood on the astronomy tower, wand shaking, fear written across his face. "I haven't got any options," he whispered, voice trembling. But he did. He had choices, even if he didn't see them. Dumbledore offered him a way out. Snape ensured his survival. Regulus never had that moment of hesitation. He knew what had to be done. He didn't plead for another path. He made his own. Imagine if Draco had been in Regulus's place. Could he have walked into that cave, knowing he wouldn't walk out? Could he have faced death alone, with no one there to save him? Draco struggled to fix a vanishing cabinet. Regulus unraveled the mystery of Voldemort's immortality. One flinched at taking a life. The other willingly gave up his own. Their stories prove that Slytherin is not just ambition and cunning, it is about choice. The choice to seek power or reject it, to serve oneself or sacrifice everything for something greater. Regulus was never meant to be a hero. He was groomed to follow orders, to be another cog in Voldemort's war machine. And yet, he broke free from that destiny, making a decision no one expected. Draco's redemption was slow, uncertain, filled with fear. He spent years caught between what he had been taught and what he knew was right. He wasn't brave enough to openly defy Voldemort. He only turned away when he had no other choice. Regulus, however, had every chance to stay silent. No one would have known what he discovered. No one would have blamed him for looking away. But he refused. Both were products of the same system. The Malfoys and the Blacks, two of the most powerful pure-blood families, deeply embedded in Voldemort's ideology. But while Draco's story ended with survival, Regulus's ended with sacrifice. The difference? Support. Draco had people who pulled him back from the edge. Regulus had only himself. Perhaps the saddest part is that Draco, even years later, likely never knew Regulus's story. The wizarding world barely remembered it. Had he known, maybe he would have seen what true Slytherin courage looked like. Maybe he would have understood that being part of that house was never about blind loyalty to a cause, but about making the hardest choices when no one else dared. Their paths may have been different, but both serve as a reminder that Slytherin is not defined by darkness. It is not just a house of villains. It is a house of survivors, of strategists, of those who walk the fine line between power and destruction. Regulus chose destruction to take down Voldemort from within, even if it cost him everything. Draco chose survival, but in the end, both turned away from the path laid out for them. If there is one truth in their stories, it is this: Slytherin is not just about ambition. It is about what you are willing to sacrifice for the future you believe in. Could Regulus Black have trusted anyone? Could he have reached out for help instead of facing death alone? If he had confided in Sirius, would things have ended differently? or was his fate sealed the moment he uncovered Voldemort's secret? Regulus had no allies. His brother had left the family years ago, cutting all ties with the Blacks. If Regulus had gone to Sirius, would he have listened? Or would he have dismissed it as another pureblood scheme? Their last conversation had likely been a fight. Sirius saw his brother as weak, as someone who blindly followed their parents' beliefs. Would he have believed that Regulus had turned against Voldemort? Or would he have assumed it was a trap? Dumbledore might have been an option. He was always searching for those who could aid in the fight against Voldemort, but Regulus had no way to reach him. The Order of the Phoenix did not trust Slytherins. They saw them as Death Eaters or future Death Eaters. Even if Regulus had tried, he would have been met with suspicion. To them he was just another Black, just another pureblood, willing to serve the Dark Lord. And so he had no choice. He carried the truth alone. He could not turn to his family. He could not turn to the Order. The only creature he could trust was Kreacher, a house elf bound by magic, sworn to serve. The irony was cruel. The proud heir of the House of Black, trusting his fate to a servant his family had always treated as lesser. But Kreacher was not just a servant. He was the only one who truly loved Regulus. When Regulus told him the plan, Kreacher did not question it. He obeyed, and when his master ordered him to leave him behind, to take the locket and destroy it, Kreacher followed that order with devotion. For decades, he tried to fulfill his master's last wish. Regulus had no illusions. He knew he was walking into his own grave. He had no way of knowing if Kreacher would ever succeed. He had no guarantee that anyone would ever learn the truth. He did it anyway. He was 19, barely more than a boy, and he sacrificed himself with no promise of victory. Imagine how it felt to stand in that cave, the weight of the locket around his neck, knowing he would never leave, to drink the potion, feeling it burn his insides, his strength slipping away with every drop, to hear the inferi stir in the water, knowing they were coming for him. And yet he did not run, he did not beg, he made his choice. His story is tragic, not just because of his death, but because he died alone. No one knew. No one came to save him. His own family never learned the truth. The world moved on, believing him to be just another fallen Death Eater. Years later, when Harry learned the truth, when Kreacher finally spoke of his master's sacrifice, it was the first time Regulus's name was honored, the first time anyone understood what he had done, and even then it was too late. Regulus had no allies, no recognition, no legacy, and yet he was one of the first to strike at Voldemort, one of the first to see his weakness, one of the first to act. He did not do it for glory, he did not do it for revenge, he did it because he knew it had to be done. That is why his story matters. Not because he won, but because he fought when no one else would. Regulus Black was raised in a world where blood purity was sacred. The House of Black had long upheld Slytherin ideals, passing down their belief in the supremacy of pureblood wizards. Regulus was expected to follow the same path. He did. He became a Death Eater young, eager to prove himself worthy of the Dark Lord's favor. But something changed. At first, he was like any other follower, loyal, obedient, believing in the cause. But Regulus was not blind. He saw things others ignored, the way Voldemort treated his own men, the way he discarded them when they were no longer useful. The cause of pure blood superiority was nothing more than a tool. Voldemort did not care about the legacy of Slytherin. He cared only about his own power. The turning point came with Kreacher, a house elf, insignificant in Voldemort's eyes, but not in Regulus. When Voldemort used Kreacher to test the cursed potion in the cave, he did not expect him to return. He did not care if he lived or died. To the Dark Lord, He was nothing, but Kreacher did return, and he told Regulus everything. That was the moment Regulus saw the truth. Voldemort was not a noble leader restoring wizarding supremacy. He was a monster, one who saw even his most loyal servants as expendable. And if he could do that to a creature bound by magic to serve him, what would he do to his human followers when they outlived their usefulness? Regulus was young, but he was not a fool. He knew he could not fight Voldemort outright. He knew he could not run, but he could do something. He could strike where Voldemort would least expect it. He could take something from him, something that made him invincible. The decision was his alone. He did not seek advice. He did not ask for help. He only told Kreacher what needed to be done. Take the locket, destroy it. No hesitation, no second thoughts. He knew what it would cost him, and he accepted it. Fear did not drive him. If he had been afraid, he would have done nothing. He would have stayed in his place, as so many others did. His decision came from something deeper, a sense of justice, a belief that what he had been taught was wrong. Regulus Black, heir of the most infamous pureblood family, saw the evil in Voldemort and refused to be part of it. His was not a dramatic rebellion. He did not make speeches or gather allies. He acted quietly, knowing he would not live to see the results, knowing that no one would ever tell his story. His death was not meant to be remembered, but it mattered. Voldemort never even realized what had happened. To him, Regulus's disappearance was insignificant, just another dead servant. That was the Dark Lord's greatest weakness. He never saw the loyalty of others as something valuable. He never considered that one of his own might turn against him, not for power, but because he had something Voldemort never understood: compassion. Regulus could have stayed silent. He could have continued his life, pretending not to know what he did, but he refused. He knew that stopping Voldemort would take years, decades, that he would never see the end of it. But that did not matter. What mattered was doing the right thing, even if no one ever knew, even if history forgot him, even if it cost him everything. Regulus Black was not a coward. He was not a blind follower. He was a boy who saw a monster and decided to fight alone. Imagine if Harry Potter had given Regulus Black the same depth as Severus Snape. If we had seen his journey unfold, his doubts creeping in, his growing horror at the truth behind Voldemort's promises. His story could have been one of the most heartbreaking arcs in the entire series. Picture a flashback scene. The Black family home, dark and cold. Regulus sits alone, staring at his reflection in an ornate mirror, his mark burning on his arm. He hears his parents praising Voldemort in the next room, his father speaking with pride about his son's loyalty. But Regulus is already lost in thought, replaying what he has learned, how the Dark Lord treats his own, how power matters more than blood. The first crack in his devotion appears. The films could have shown us the moment he made his choice, not just through a letter signed R.A.B., but through his actions. We could have seen him summon Kreacher late at night, voice shaking but determined. "You must listen carefully," he would say, kneeling to meet the house elf's eyes. "This will be the most important thing I ever ask of you." Kreacher, devoted beyond reason, would have clutched his master's robes, begging him not to go. Then, the cave scene. The silence of the water, the eerie glow of the potion in the stone basin. Regulus, standing where Voldemort once stood, knowing what must be done. The audience would see his face twist in pain as he drinks, his hands shaking as he forces himself to continue. Kreacher weeps, trying to stop him, but Regulus presses on. His breathing becomes labored, his vision blurs, and he collapses, barely able to whisper his final command. "Take the locket! Destroy it!" Imagine the horror as the inferi rise. Regulus stumbles, tries to fight, but he is too weak. The water ripples, pale hands reaching for him. The last thing he sees is Kreacher, sobbing, clutching the locket to his chest, before vanishing. The water closes over him. The screen fades to black. The emotional weight of that scene alone would have changed everything. It would have given depth to the locket's destruction later in Deathly Hallows. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione finally destroy it, they wouldn't just be destroying another Horcrux. They would be finishing what Regulus started. The moment would carry a greater sense of fulfillment, as if Regulus's sacrifice had finally been honored. Regulus's story could have also deepened Sirius's character. Imagine a scene where Harry finds an old letter in Grimmauld Place, one that Regulus had written to his brother but never sent. Sirius would read it, his face unreadable, his hands shaking slightly. He would have realized, too late, that his brother was never the coward he believed, that he had been wrong about him all along. And Kreacher, his loyalty would have taken on an even greater meaning. We would have seen him differently. Not as a bitter old elf, but as the last guardian of a forgotten hero's memory. The moment when Kreacher leads the house elves into battle at Hogwarts would have been even more powerful. He wasn't just fighting for Harry, he was fighting for Regulus. By giving Regulus's story more weight, the Harry Potter films would have added another tragic, noble figure to the war against Voldemort. His presence would have reminded us that not all Death Eaters were evil, that some realized the truth too late, that not all Slytherins were self-serving. Some were heroes, unsung, forgotten, but heroes nonetheless. His sacrifice deserved more than a passing mention. If the films had given him the attention he deserved, Regulus Black could have been one of the most unforgettable characters in the series. Instead, his bravery remained a hidden story, known only to those who looked closely enough to see it. Regulus Black never lived to see Voldemort fall. He never saw the Order of the Phoenix win, but without him their victory might never have been possible. He was the first to uncover Voldemort's greatest secret, the first to act against him not in open rebellion, but in quiet defiance that would one day change everything. If Regulus had not stolen the locket, if he had not entrusted Kreacher with his final mission, the Horcrux might have remained hidden for years. Harry, Ron, and Hermione struggled to destroy just one. Imagine if they had never found it at all. They might have spent months searching while Voldemort grew stronger. Regulus's sacrifice put the locket within their reach. He did not live to see it, but his actions paved the way for its destruction. More than that, his story shattered the myth that all Slytherin served Voldemort. For too long, Slytherin House had been cast as the villainous side of Hogwarts. Regulus proved that cunning and ambition were not traits of evil. They could be used for heroism as well. He was not like the Gryffindor heroes who fought with wands drawn and banners high. His battle was silent, unseen, but no less brave. He was not a warrior, he was not a rebel, he was a believer who lost faith and found the strength to act. That is what makes his story so powerful. He did not have the guidance of Dumbledore. He did not have an army at his back. He made his choice alone, knowing he would die for it. His legacy is not just in the locket he stole. It is in the idea that redemption is possible, that it is never too late to turn away from the wrong path, that Slytherins, so often written off as selfish, can make the ultimate sacrifice. The story of the war against Voldemort is filled with grand acts of heroism. But Regulus's act was small, quiet, and yet just as important. Imagine if the wizarding world had known his name, if people had spoken of him the way they spoke of Dumbledore or the Marauders or even Snape. But he was forgotten. Buried beneath history, his name reduced to 3 letters on a piece of parchment. R.B. A mystery, a whisper of someone who had dared to defy the Dark Lord. Even in his own family, he was misunderstood. Sirius, for all his hatred of the Black Name, never knew that his brother had turned against Voldemort, never knew that he had died trying to destroy him. That is the true tragedy of Regulus's story. He was never given the recognition he deserved, but Kreacher remembered. And in the end, so did Harry. When Kreacher told the truth about his master for the first time in years, someone understood what Regulus had done. It was a small moment, but it mattered. Harry, who had always viewed Slytherin with suspicion, saw a different kind of heroism that day. Not loud, not boastful, but a sacrifice made with no hope of reward. If the story of Regulus Black teaches us anything, it is that heroism comes in many forms. Some fight with wands, some fight with words, and some, like Regulus, fight in the shadows, knowing they will never see the light of victory. But their fight matters all the same. Regulus Black uncovered Voldemort's greatest secret before anyone else. He realized the Dark Lord had split his soul. He understood that Voldemort was not just powerful, he had made himself nearly immortal. But if Regulus knew this, why didn't he seek out the one person who could have helped him? Why didn't he go to Dumbledore? The answer lies in his upbringing. In the Black household, Dumbledore was spoken of with disdain. He was a threat, a man who corrupted the purity of wizarding society. Regulus had grown up hearing that Dumbledore favoured Muggle-borns, that he was an enemy of noble families. Even as Regulus began to question Voldemort's cause, trusting Dumbledore was not something that came naturally to him. But beyond his own doubts, there was another problem. Dumbledore would not have trusted him. The Order of the Phoenix did not take in Death Eaters, even those who claimed to have changed. Regulus was still a Black, still a Slytherin, still marked by the Dark Lord's brand. If he had appeared at Dumbledore's doorstep, claiming to have found one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, the Order might have assumed it was a trap. There was also the issue of timing. In the 1970s, no one even suspected that Voldemort had created Horcruxes. Dumbledore, brilliant as he was, had not yet pieced it together. When he finally did, it was because of Tom Riddle's obsession with the number 7 and Slughorn's hidden memory. If Regulus had gone to him years earlier, would Dumbledore have even believed him? And what if Voldemort found out? No Death Eater could simply disappear without consequences. The Dark Lord kept a close watch on his ranks. His spies were everywhere. If Regulus had attempted to flee, he would have been hunted down. He never would have reached Dumbledore alive. So he did what no one expected. He acted alone. He planned in silence. He prepared for his own death. He did not beg for help or look for allies. He gave his last order to Kreacher and walked to his fate, knowing no one would come for him. The great irony is that Dumbledore spent decades searching for Horcruxes. Had Regulus been able to pass along his knowledge, everything might have changed. Dumbledore would have known about the cave, about the cursed potion, about the locket. Perhaps the war would have ended sooner. Perhaps fewer lives would have been lost. But history does not deal in what-ifs. Regulus died alone, his truth buried with him. By the time Dumbledore and Harry unravelled the mystery, years had passed. The war had already consumed too much. The knowledge Regulus had could have made a difference, but no one ever heard him speak it. In the end, his silence was not cowardice. It was necessity. The world he lived in did not allow for second chances. He knew that. And still he chose to fight, Not with an army, not with recognition, but with a single act of defiance that changed everything. Even if no one realized it at the time, Sirius Black was a star, the rebel, the Black who broke away. He walked out of Grimmauld Place and never looked back, rejecting everything his family stood for. He carved his own path, became a marauder, a protector, a member of the Order of the Phoenix. He was loud, defiant, impossible to ignore. But Regulus, he was the one left behind. He watched as his mother screamed Sirius's name in fury, watched as she burned it off the family tree, erasing him as if he had never existed. He listened to his father speak of his older brother with cold disdain. And he stayed. Maybe because he had nowhere else to go. Maybe because he thought he could survive it. Maybe because leaving simply wasn't an option for him. Sirius had James. He had Remus, Peter, the Gryffindor dormitory. He had a home outside of Grimmauld Place. But Regulus had no one. The House of Black was suffocating, and yet it was all he had. He followed the path laid out for him, not because he was a true believer, but because it was expected. He became a Death Eater, not out of fanaticism, but out of obligation. He did what was required. But doubt festered. It grew in the shadows of his mind, whispering that something was wrong. He watched the war escalate, watched as Voldemort's power spread. And then Kreacher returned from the cave, broken, shaking, telling him what had happened. That was the moment everything changed, the moment he saw the Dark Lord for what he truly was. Regulus was not like Sirius. He did not burn bridges and storm out. He did not shout his defiance for the world to hear. He was quiet, calculating. He saw what needed to be done, and he did it alone. No grand speeches, no allies, no safety net. He simply acted knowing it would cost him everything. Maybe if Sirius had known, he would have seen Regulus differently. Maybe he would have understood that his little brother was never just a brainwashed follower, that he had seen the truth and done something about it in his own way. But Sirius never knew. By the time he could have learned the truth, Regulus was long dead, and the war had taken too much. They never got the chance to speak again, never had the moment where Sirius could see his brother for who he truly was, never had the conversation where Regulus could explain why he stayed. That is the tragedy of their story. Two brothers who might have understood each other, if only fate had given them time. Regulus' sacrifice was not for glory. It was not to prove anything to his family or to make amends with Sirius. It was simply the right thing to do. And in that he was more like his brother than anyone ever realized. If things had been different, if they had had that one chance, maybe Sirius would have seen that Regulus was a hero too. Not in the way of the marauders, not in the way of the Order, but in the way of someone who fights, knowing no one will ever sing their name. Sirius burned bright, defiant, impossible to ignore. Regulus faded quietly into the dark, but in the end they were both stars, just burning in different ways. Regulus Black became a Death Eater at 16, young, eager, proud to be chosen. He had grown up in a house that worshipped Voldemort. His parents saw the Dark Lord as the savior of the wizarding world, the one who would restore the old ways. For Regulus, joining the Death Eaters must have felt like fulfilling a destiny, a moment of triumph, a sign that he was worthy. But was he ever truly one of them? The evidence suggests otherwise. Regulus was never seen at the Dark Lord's side, never named among those who led raids, tortured muggles, or left the dark mark hanging in the sky. He was not among the feared names Bellatrix, Lucius, Mulciber, Avery. His presence was quiet, unnoticed, a shadow in the background. Perhaps he believed he could serve from a distance, that his loyalty alone would be enough, but Voldemort did not accept passive followers. Being a Death Eater was not a symbolic act. It required action, violence, absolute obedience. And as Regulus saw what that truly meant, the illusion shattered. He saw too much. He saw what happened to those who failed, those who hesitated. He saw how Voldemort treated even the most devoted, discarding them when they were no longer useful. The Dark Lord did not build a world of pure-blood superiority. He built a world of fear. Power was the only thing he valued. Blood status was just a tool. Regulus had joined willingly, unlike Draco Malfoy, who was forced into service. But he was also the first to realize his mistake. He could have done what many others did, looked away, convinced himself that the suffering was necessary, stayed loyal out of fear. Instead, he did the unthinkable. He chose to betray Voldemort. He could have run, faked his death, fled the country. But running would have changed nothing. The war would have gone on. The Dark Lord would have remained untouchable. Regulus did not choose the easy way out. He did not turn his back and pretend it wasn't his problem. He stayed, watched, waited, until he saw his chance. And when he found out about the Horcrux, he acted. He did what no one else had done, what even Dumbledore had not yet discovered. He stole what Voldemort valued most, his immortality. Did he regret ever joining? Likely. But regret alone is meaningless. Many Death Eaters regretted. Few did anything about it. Regulus did. He was only a Death Eater for as long as it took to see the truth. Then he became something else entirely. History never counted him among Voldemort's followers. His name was never spoken in the same breath as Bellatrix or Snape, because in the end, Regulus Black was never truly one of them. He was something far rarer, a Death Eater who chose to fight back. The story of the Black Brothers is a story of choices, 2 Slytherins, 2 paths, 2 fates that could not have been more different. Sirius rejected his family. He despised everything they stood for: blood purity, blind loyalty, worship of Voldemort. He ran away, found a new home with the Potters, and embraced the ideals of Gryffindor. Freedom, bravery, rebellion. But his defiance came at a cost. His own mother erased his name from the family tree. His brother never followed him. And in the end, Sirius's freedom was short-lived. He was thrown into Azkaban for a crime he didn't commit, stripped of his name, his identity, his life. Years of torment, of cold, of despair. Then, even when he escaped, he was not truly free. The war had taken everything. He was a fugitive, locked in a house he once ran from, trapped by the very past he had spent his life trying to escape. Regulus stayed. He was the perfect son, the obedient heir. He joined the Death Eaters, played the role he was meant to play. But something inside him cracked. He saw Voldemort for what he truly was, a tyrant, not a leader, a monster who used people like disposable pawns. And when he understood the truth, he acted. He could have done what so many others did. He could have stayed silent, kept his head down, let the war consume those who fought it. But he didn't. He chose to do something no one else had dared to do, betray Voldemort from within. And he paid the price with his life. Sirius always thought of Regulus as weak, a coward who followed orders, who let their parents mold him into what they wanted. But who was braver? The one who ran, or the one who stayed and fought his battle alone? Sirius was bold, reckless, loud in his defiance. Regulus was quiet, careful, deliberate, but his courage was no less real. Both of them tried to fight against the fate that was given to them. But Sirius, for all his bravery, never escaped the ghosts of his past. Even at Grimmauld Place he was haunted by the family he swore to leave behind. Regulus, in his own way, managed to break free. He made his own choice. He shaped his own destiny, even if it ended in death. In the end, they were not so different. Both betrayed what was expected of them. Both fought against Voldemort in their own way. Both left a mark that would outlive them. But only one of them ever knew the truth about the other. Sirius died never knowing that Regulus had been on his side all along, that his little brother had not been a blind follower, but one of the first to stand against Voldemort. Perhaps if fate had been kinder, they would have understood each other. But fate was never kind to the House of Black. Slytherin has always been misunderstood. People say it is the house of villains, of those who seek power at any cost, that its students are selfish, ruthless, willing to betray anyone for their own gain. But Regulus Black proves that this is a lie. He was a Slytherin, he was ambitious, he was cunning, but he was not a traitor, he was not a monster, he was not a follower of evil. Regulus did what Slytherins do best. He adapted. He did not rush into battle like a Gryffindor. He did not rebel loudly like his brother. He saw the world for what it was, weighed his options, and played the long game. He planned, he acted when the moment was right. When he first joined the Death Eaters, he might have believed he was fulfilling his role as a pureblood heir. He was young, impressionable, eager to prove himself. But when he saw the truth, he did not let blind loyalty cloud his judgment. He thought like a Slytherin. He saw an opportunity to act. And he did not waste it. The moment he learned about Voldemort's Horcrux, he knew what had to be done. He did not throw himself into the fight recklessly. He did not challenge the Dark Lord openly. That would have been foolish. Instead, he worked in secret, using deception, using strategy. He made sure his sacrifice would not be in vain. That is why he is the perfect example of what a true Slytherin should be. He used cunning not for personal gain, but to destroy something greater than himself. He acted alone, knowing he would not be celebrated, knowing no one would even know what he had done. And yet he did it anyway. Regulus's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. He knew Voldemort trusted no one, that the Horcrux would be hidden somewhere only the Dark Lord himself could reach. He used Kreacher to gain access. He played the part of the obedient Death Eater until the moment he was ready to strike. And when the time came, he executed his plan flawlessly. He did not hesitate. He did not let fear stop him. He walked into that cave knowing he would never leave. But he also knew that his actions mattered, that he was taking a step that no one else had dared to take. Some might say Gryffindor values bravery above all else, but Slytherin values something just as important: determination, the ability to see a goal and do whatever it takes to achieve it. Regulus embodied that perfectly. His goal was not power. His goal was not personal survival. His goal was to stop Voldemort. And he followed through, even at the cost of his own life. Would he have been sorted into a different house if he had made a different choice? No, he was always meant to be in Slytherin. But he is proof that being a Slytherin does not mean being heartless. It does not mean being cruel. It means being willing to make the hard choices, the ones others are too afraid to make. Regulus Black was the kind of Slytherin the world needs to remember. Not one who sought power for himself, but one who used his ambition to destroy a tyrant. Not one who betrayed for his own gain, but one who sacrificed for something greater. And in the end, that is what makes him one of the most remarkable Slytherins of all time. So much could have changed. So many small moments could have altered Regulus Black's fate, giving him a different ending. History is made up of choices, and one shift, one conversation, one decision could have led to a completely different outcome. If Sirius had spoken to Regulus before leaving, things might have been different. Sirius left Grimmauld Place in anger, believing his family to be beyond redemption. But what if he had stayed just long enough to talk to his brother? What if he had told Regulus that there was another way to live, a world beyond their family's twisted beliefs? Would Regulus have had the strength to walk away just as Sirius did? Or would he have still felt trapped by the expectations placed upon him? Regulus did not have the same defiance as Sirius. He was not a rebel. He was not someone who could simply pack a bag and never look back. He stayed. He followed the path expected of him. But maybe if his older brother had reached out, he would have had the courage to leave. Maybe he wouldn't have become a Death Eater at all. If Dumbledore had learned about the Horcruxes earlier, the war might have taken a different course. In the 1970s, he was still searching for answers, still trying to understand how Voldemort had become so powerful. When he finally discovered the truth, it was already too late. Voldemort had disappeared, leaving behind fragments of his soul hidden across the world. But Regulus had figured it out before anyone else. He had uncovered the secret on his own, years before Harry even existed. If Dumbledore had known, if he had somehow intercepted Regulus before he went to the cave, perhaps they could have worked together. Perhaps they could have found a way to destroy the Horcrux without Regulus having to die. If Kreacher had been able to destroy the locket, things would have changed once more. That was Regulus's final wish, to rid the world of this evil, to undo what Voldemort had done. He entrusted the task to the only creature he could trust, his family's house elf. But Kreacher could not destroy it. For years he tried, but the magic was too strong. Imagine if Kreacher had succeeded. Imagine if the locket had been destroyed in that very moment, before Voldemort ever returned to power. It would have been one less Horcrux to find, one less barrier standing in the way of his downfall. Maybe Harry would never have had to spend months hunting them down. Maybe the war would have ended sooner.
And then there is the greatest question of all. What if Regulus had escaped?
He went into that cave knowing he would not return. He drank the potion, knowing it would weaken him beyond saving. He made his peace with death long before the Inferi dragged him into the water. But what if something had gone differently? What if he had fought just a little harder, if Kreacher had been able to pull him away, if he had somehow managed to break free and get back to Grimmauld Place? Would he have gone into hiding? Would he have sought out Dumbledore? Or would he have disappeared, waiting for the right moment to strike again? Regulus was intelligent, strategic. He could have continued the fight from the shadows, working against Voldemort in secret. But that is not how history played out. Regulus Black remained in the shadows. His name was barely spoken in the war against Voldemort. The Order of the Phoenix never knew of his sacrifice. To the world, he was just another Death Eater who disappeared, lost in the chaos of war.
And yet, without him, Harry Potter might not have won.
Regulus was the first person to actively fight against Voldemort's immortality. Before Dumbledore, before Harry, before anyone, he was the first to take a Horcrux from its hiding place, the first to understand the key to the Dark Lord's downfall. He set events in motion that would eventually lead to victory, even if he never saw it himself. His sacrifice mattered, even if no one knew about it. He never got recognition, never had his name written in history books, never became a symbol of the resistance. But without him, the final battle at Hogwarts might have gone very differently. Imagine if the world had known what he did, if Slytherin House had honored him instead of pretending he never existed, If Hogwarts had told his story, proving once and for all that not all Slytherins were on Voldemort's side, that heroism does not belong to one house alone. Perhaps one day there will be a portrait of him at Hogwarts. A young man with dark hair standing in the corner of the Slytherin common room, his eyes solemn but determined. A reminder that true strength is not in seeking power, but in knowing when to give it up for something greater. Regulus Black never lived to see the war end. He never knew Harry Potter, never saw Voldemort fall, never heard the world speak his name with honor, but he changed the course of history in ways no one ever realized.
And maybe, just maybe, that is the kind of hero who deserves to be remembered.
Kreacher was never meant to be important. He was just another house elf, a creature bound to serve, to obey, to exist in the background of the grand wizarding world. The Black family treated him no differently than a piece of furniture, something to be used and discarded when it no longer pleased them. But Regulus was different. He was raised in the same traditions as his parents. He grew up hearing that house elves were beneath wizards, that they existed only to serve. He could have treated Kreacher with the same cold indifference his mother did. He could have ignored him entirely. But he didn't. Regulus never spoke out against his family's beliefs. He never rebelled openly like Sirius. But in the way he treated Kreacher, there was something quietly, profoundly different. A small kindness, a moment of respect. Perhaps Regulus never even realized what it meant. But Kreacher did. To a house elf, respect was everything. Kreacher had spent his life serving a family that saw him as nothing. And then came Regulus, the only Black who looked at him like he mattered, the only Black who saw him as more than a tool. So when Regulus ordered Kreacher to follow Voldemort into the cave, the little elf obeyed, as he had been trained to do. But the horror of what he endured, forced to drink the cursed potion, abandoned to die among the inferi, shook him to his core. And then something happened that had never happened before. Regulus asked him what he had seen. He listened. He did not dismiss Kreacher's suffering as irrelevant. He did not treat it as a minor inconvenience. He cared, and for Kreacher that changed everything. When Regulus made his decision to steal the Horcrux, he entrusted Kreacher with something no one else ever had, his legacy, his final wish, his dying mission. Take the locket, destroy it. Those words became Kreacher's purpose. Regulus knew he would not return from that cave. He knew Kreacher would have to leave him behind, and yet in his final moments he did not think of his own death. He thought of Kreacher. Go home. A simple command, but one that carried so much weight. He did not see Kreacher as expendable. He saw him as someone worth saving.
No one had ever done that before.
And so, for decades, Kreacher clung to Regulus's memory. He kept the locket, unable to destroy it, but unwilling to let it go. He suffered in silence, trapped in the house of a family that had long forgotten Regulus, forced to serve those who would never understand what his master had done. When Harry Potter came to Grimmauld Place, he saw Kreacher as nothing more than a bitter, hateful creature. And in many ways he was. Time had twisted him, broken him. He was angry, resentful, filled with years of neglected grief. But then something changed. Harry gave Kreacher what Regulus had once given him: kindness, respect, acknowledgement. And the moment Harry gave Kreacher the fake locket, something inside the elf awakened. He clutched it, eyes wide, voice shaking, whispering his master's name. Master Regulus. It was the moment that changed him, the moment that reminded him of who he once was, of the boy he had loved, of the mission he had failed to complete. From that moment on, Kreacher became someone else. He was no longer a bitter, resentful servant. He had a purpose again, a reason to fight. He led the house elves into battle at Hogwarts, wielding kitchen knives, rallying his kind with a war cry for Master Regulus. Because for Kreacher, Regulus was never just a master. He was the only person who had ever made him feel like he mattered. Regulus was long gone. The world had forgotten him, but Kreacher never did. And that is the power of kindness. Even a single act can live on long after a person is gone. Even one moment of respect can change a life forever.
Regulus may not have been remembered as a hero, but in Kreacher's heart, he always was.